The museum did not merely exist within the city. It commanded it. Its stone facade stretched high above the surrounding streets. A vision of permanence in a place where everything else seemed destined to crumble. Commuters paused in their rush to glance at it. Tourists lifted cameras as though compelled, and even the indifferent could not ignore the building's quiet authority. In daylight, it was magnificent. White columns gleamed like ivory, catching the sun in a way that made the entrance glow, as if lit from within. The steps leading to the front doors were worn smooth by decades of visitors. Yet, they held the dignity of an altar. Passing through those doors was like leaving the modern world behind, stepping into a space untouched by time. Inside, the air was cool and heavy. Not stale, but infused with something older. Something that had settled into the walls across centuries. The echo of footsteps stretched farther than seemed natural, rebounding softly until it was unclear if the sound came from the living or from something else. The grand hall was breathtaking. Murals painted across the ceiling told forgotten myths. Creatures half human and half shadow. Gods with eyes of fire. Warriors kneeling before nameless idols. Chandeliers spilled fractured light over the polished marble floor. Tourists craned their necks upward, whispering in awe. Children, often noisy outside, grew hushed here, their voices instinctively lowered. The silence was the most remarkable feature. It was not empty. It pressed down, thick and expectant, as though the walls themselves were listening. Visitors rarely noticed it at first, but many commented afterward. I don't know why, but I felt like I should whisper in there. That silence was not an absence. It was a presence. The deeper you walked into the museum, the stranger the quiet became. Corridors stretched like veins, guiding visitors through galleries devoted to civilizations long dead. Glass cases held brittle manuscripts whose ink had turned to brown dust. Fragments of pottery etched with symbols no one could decipher. Weapons dulled by centuries, yet still menacing in their simplicity. The atmosphere was reverent, yes, but also unbalanced. Some guests noticed the chandeliers trembling, though the air was still. Others found their watches inexplicably stopping, only to start again once they left the building. There was a hallway where footsteps echoed twice. First, the step of the visitor, then a second sound, half a beat behind, as though something unseen followed. Staff avoided discussing these things, but there were notes, scribbles in margins of logbooks, reports filed away in drawers, never meant for the public. One early account, dated 1937, described a janitor who refused to finish his shift. I will not go down that hallway again. I heard someone behind me, but when I turned, it was empty. I called out, but the echo answered wrong. It was not my voice that came back. Visitors too left comments, carefully worded in the guest books at the exits. Chilly spot near the west wing. Strange reflection in the glass. Uncomfortable feeling, like being watched. Most complaints were dismissed politely, but occasionally a name reappeared. Different people describing the same place, the same sensation. And always, without fail, these entries referred to the far end of the museum's east wing, where the statue stood. It stood in an alcove that most visitors hurried through. At first glance, it was unimpressive. A human figure, roughly life-sized, carved from a dark stone. Its surface was pitted and scarred by time, its details worn smooth. But its posture was strange. Its head tilted slightly to the side, as if listening. Its long-fingered hands pressed tightly against its chest, as though protecting something unseen. Its face, or what remained of it, was featureless. The eyes were smooth hollows, the mouth a shallow indentation. Yet those who stood before it swore they were being studied, watched, judged. There was no placard, no information. The catalog simply listed it as Donation, 1923. Provenance unknown. That was all. Children reacted most strongly. They tugged at sleeves, insisting it had moved. Some cried, hiding their faces against their parents. One little boy, recorded in a visitor complaint in 1965, had whispered, "It's whispering my name." His mother, shaken, carried him out and refused to return. Guards avoided that gallery after dark. One man, hired in the late 1980s, wrote in his resignation letter, "I don't care what you pay. That statue is wrong. It doesn't belong in this world." Every time I passed, I felt it lean closer. I swear it breathes. Strangely, the letter was never placed in his file. The statue remained. When the last visitor left and the lights dimmed, the museum changed. The grandeur of the day gave way to suffocating emptiness. The silence thickened, wrapping itself around every corner, swallowing sound whole. Guards carried radios, but static often disrupted the channels, hissing with bursts of noise like distant whispers. The monitors in the security office showed row after row of empty halls. But not always. A shadow crossing a corridor with no source. A display case rattling, though the air was still. Lights dimming one by one, as if in sequence. The worst footage came from the statue gallery. A grainy tape once circulated quietly among staff before disappearing from the archives. It showed the figure standing, as it always did, still and silent. But over the span of 20 minutes, the head turned by the slightest degree. When the camera glitched back, the statue was facing forward again. Officially, the incident was dismissed. The director claimed camera interference, but those who had seen it never forgot. One janitor, after a single night shift, refused to return. He told a coworker, "It isn't quiet in there. It's listening. And when you listen long enough, it answers." Long before the museum gained fame for its exhibits, it carried a reputation. Local newspapers in the 1930s ran small pieces on strange occurrences. Headline clippings survive in the archives. Night Watchman reports unusual noises. Artifact case shattered without cause. The stories were treated lightly at the time, but together they formed a pattern. One article described a night guard who quit after claiming to hear voices calling his name in an empty wing. Another told of visitors who fainted near the Nameless Statue, waking later with no memory of what happened. These were brushed aside as superstition, yet they continued for decades. In 1954, a curator privately kept notes about oddities in the museum. His diary, discovered after his death, contained unsettling passages. The staff refuses to patrol near the statue. They whisper about sounds in the East Wing, breathing, murmurs. I must admit, I hear them too. The board will not listen. They say I am unwell. But I fear this museum does not merely preserve history, it consumes it. Over the years, rumors spread among the city's residents. Couples on late-night museum tours reported feeling hands brush against them in darkened halls. A group of students once claimed they saw a figure standing behind them in a reflection, though no one was there when they turned. Photos taken inside sometimes developed with streaks of light or ghostly faces in the background. One visitor, a teacher from out of town, sent a letter to the museum's administration in 1971. Your museum is beautiful, but I must tell you something. When I stood near the statue, I felt overcome with dread. I could swear it whispered to me, though I cannot recall the words. I left in a hurry, but even now, weeks later, I dream of it. Its head turns toward me in my sleep. The letter was politely acknowledged, but filed away, never spoken of again. A long-serving director in the 1980s, Dr. Malcolm Reeves, dismissed claims publicly, but privately, his writings told a different story. His journals, donated to the library after his passing, describe sleepless nights and growing paranoia. I fear the building itself resents us. The staff is restless. The guards leave without warning. And the statue, it is worse. I have stood before it and felt my thoughts falter, as though something else pressed into my mind. I have considered removing it from display, but when I bring the subject to the board, they refuse. They say it is harmless. Yet every instinct I have tells me it is the root of this place's unease. Dr. Reeves died suddenly in his home. His death was declared natural, but some whispered that the stress of his role had hastened it. Others muttered of curse, though never in public. The museum endured. Through every decade, the whispers remained. Staff came and went, each generation inheriting the same unease, the same unspoken rules. Never linger near the statue. Never trust the silence after dark. The newspapers stopped reporting the oddities. Visitors' complaints were filed away. The museum presented itself as serene, a sanctuary of art and history. But beneath the polished marble and golden chandeliers, the silence deepened. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of something waiting. The museum at night was a different world. The marble halls that gleamed in daylight transformed into shadows and silhouettes. The chandeliers casting fractured light that barely reached the far corners. The security office was a small room filled with monitors. A labyrinth of grainy black and white feeds stretching across every gallery, corridor, and stairwell. At first, the footage seemed harmless. Empty corridors, static exhibits, the occasional janitor passing with a mop. But over weeks, guards began to notice anomalies. One tape, recorded in 2012, showed a painting in the Renaissance wing. A visitor who had been present in the footage watched in horror as the figure in the painting seemed to blink. A subtle motion, barely perceptible, but undeniable. The security guard on duty froze, leaning closer to the screen. Later that night, in the West Wing, a display case rattled violently. Cameras caught the case, sliding open for a brief moment, then snapping shut, as if an invisible hand had pushed it. There were no footprints on the polished floor. No sign of tampering. Another tape from the East Wing showed shadows moving against the grain of the light, forming shapes that were vaguely human, but impossibly long, contorted at unnatural angles. At one point, the shape seemed to follow the guard's patrol on the camera, halting whenever he paused. The staff began cataloging these incidents. Each anomaly was logged in secret. The flicker of a light, the sudden chill in an empty gallery, whispers captured faintly in the audio feed. No explanation could be offered. Most rationalizations, drafts, faulty equipment, human error, crumbled under the mounting evidence. Night guards, curators, and cleaning crews all experienced phenomena. A long-term night guard described the sensation as if the building itself had a heartbeat. I can hear it if I stop moving. A slow, rhythmic thump, sometimes faint, sometimes so loud I swear it shakes the floor beneath me. It isn't mechanical. It isn't wind. It's alive. Employees noted subtle changes in their environment. Lights dimmed without cause. Documents vanished from desks, only to reappear in locations the staff swore they had not visited. Cold spots appeared, localized and unnerving, leaving vapor from breath hanging in midair. Some even reported objects moving on their own. A pen rolling across a desk, a folder sliding off a shelf. Small, almost insignificant at first, but unsettling when repeated nightly. In 2015, a curator left an anonymous note in the staff log. The staff jokes about haunted hallways. I do not joke. I hear whispers when I am alone, in languages I do not know. I see movement from the corner of my eye. I am not sure how much longer I can continue. Within months, the staff turnover rose dramatically. Employees spoke quietly of a presence, something that did not wish to be disturbed, yet actively observed. Even daytime visitors reported strange occurrences. A couple touring the museum described an exhibit suddenly fogging over, despite the temperature being warm and the air conditioning off. Others recalled seeing figures in their peripheral vision, only for the shapes to vanish when looked at directly. Photographers frequently found anomalies. One man developed a roll of film to discover faint, ghostly faces lingering near statues. Another had recorded a video that showed the shadow of a figure passing through walls, moving with a fluidity that defied physics. A letter sent to the museum in 2017 read, "I visited with my daughter. She was drawn to the statue in the East Wing. She screamed suddenly and said it was speaking to her. I laughed at first, thinking it was her imagination, but even I heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible, say my name. I left immediately. These stories rarely reached the public. The museum maintained its reputation as a peaceful sanctuary. But privately, these incidents were discussed in hushed tones, compiled in notebooks, logged in digital archives, and slowly forming a pattern of escalating phenomena. After hours, the museum seemed alive in ways the living could not fully perceive. The walls held shadows that lingered longer than their source. Footsteps echoed where no one walked. Faint whispers were heard in empty galleries, sometimes unintelligible, sometimes eerily clear. One guard interviewed before leaving his position explained, "It's not just noises. It's the feeling of being watched, of being studied. The building breathes. I can hear it sigh in the hallways. It doesn't like me there. I am not welcome." Many visitors who returned late at night described a sudden oppressive pressure, like the building itself pressing against their chests. The nameless statue in the East Wing radiated a chill that extended beyond the immediate room, seeping into nearby corridors. In 2018, a security officer recorded a brief video of the gallery. The statue appeared unchanged. But in the corner of the frame, a shadow detached itself from the walls, stretching unnaturally toward the officer's patrol path, before vanishing into the darkness. The officer quit the next day, leaving only a note. "I saw it. It knows we see it, and it will not forgive curiosity." By the early 2020s, curiosity about the museum's unexplained phenomena had grown online. Amateur paranormal investigators gained access, often granted special permission to film after hours. They reported flickering lights, sudden drops in temperature, and electronic equipment failing inexplicably. Cameras sometimes recorded faint forms drifting through the halls, vanishing upon approach. Audio recorders picked up low-frequency murmurs, whispers that seemed to call names, speak in phrases impossible to understand. One investigator, in a detailed report, noted, "The atmosphere is oppressive. You feel it in your bones. Objects appear to move, or perhaps we perceive them moving because the building manipulates our senses." I have never encountered a location like this. Even skeptics left shaken, reporting anxiety, insomnia, and an unshakable feeling of being followed long after leaving the premises. Professional investigators conducted controlled studies documenting anomalies meticulously. Thermal cameras recorded areas of sudden cold that could not be explained. Electromagnetic field meters spiked in patterns resembling deliberate movement. One documented event involved the Nameless Statue. During a live study, multiple cameras recorded the head subtly turning to face each investigator as they moved across the room. Sensors detected temperature drops localized around the figure, and audio devices picked up faint, indiscernible murmurs. The lead investigator noted in a report, "I do not know how to rationalize this. All controls were in place. No mechanical intervention, no drafts. Yet multiple instruments confirmed movement, temperature fluctuations, and auditory phenomena. Something within that gallery is active, something aware." Staff attrition was high, particularly among night shifts. Guards left abruptly, often without explanation, sometimes citing personal reasons, sometimes writing cryptic notes. "I cannot endure the watch any longer. It watches everything. I do not sleep here. I fear it follows me, even beyond the walls." Curators, though committed to the collection, also reported feelings of dread. Some avoided the East Wing entirely. Others were reassigned after months of recurring nightmares and episodes of fainting near specific exhibits. One janitor reportedly left without warning, abandoning his shift mid-cleaning. Security cameras later showed him walking calmly toward the exit, but shadows in the footage seemed to linger around him longer than should have been possible. Despite mounting evidence, the museum administration sought rational explanations. Drafts were blamed for rattling doors, faulty wiring for flickering lights, equipment malfunction for audio anomalies. Every night, the building passed inspections, yet reports of phenomena continued. In private, however, the senior staff met to discuss the growing unease. They shared stories they could not explain. Whispers, moving shadows, objects that shifted without cause. The consensus was unsettling. The museum's anomalies were increasing in frequency and intensity. A memo from 2021 stated simply, "All personnel must continue regular duties. Visitors are not to be informed. Ensure security logs are maintained and anomalies reported discreetly. No explanation exists at present, but this must be contained. Despite all attempts at control, the museum's reputation as a serene place persisted. Outside, visitors marveled at exhibits, unaware of the unseen forces operating within the walls. But for those who stayed late, who wandered the empty corridors, who dared to watch the cameras, the truth was impossible to ignore. The silent museum was very much alive, and it had been watching for centuries. Even as decades passed, the silent museum resisted explanation. Its walls held secrets older than any living person, whispers and movements that defied rational thought. Visitors marveled at exhibits, unaware that each artifact carried not only history, but traces of unseen presences. Some historians speculated that the building itself absorbed the memories and emotions of all who passed through it. Others suggested the statues and paintings were mere vessels, anchors for lingering consciousness that refused to dissipate. But no one could say for certain. The East Wing, where the Nameless Statue resided, remained the epicenter of activity. No instrument, no camera, no ghost hunting device could fully contain the anomalies there. Even seasoned curators avoided prolonged presence. Archive records revealed chilling patterns. Nightly occurrences were not random. They escalated in intensity around certain dates. One log from 1986 noted incidents increase around the 23rd of each month. Unexplained whispers, cold spots, shadow movements, staff unrest peaks. Further observation required. Decades later, researchers reviewing the archives in 2020 found the same pattern. The silent museum seemed to operate by rules that no human could understand, yet consistently followed them. One particularly stormy night in October, a small group of paranormal investigators gained access for a final extended study. Lightning illuminated the museum's exterior, the rain drumming on windows like distant applause for the unknown. Inside, the air felt charged, alive. Footsteps echoed where no one walked. The statue's presence was palpable, its dark eyes seeming to bore into each person in the room. One investigator whispered, "It's aware of us. Every move we make, it knows." Cameras captured fleeting shadows, faint whispers translated through spectral audio devices, and instruments recorded electromagnetic spikes. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a rhythm that no one could match. At one point, one investigator turned to speak to a colleague and froze. In the corner of his vision, he saw a figure detach from a painting, slowly emerging into the corridor. When he blinked, after hours of observation, the team documented every anomaly they could. Yet even they admitted in their final report that the museum's behavior could not be fully explained. Lights flickered without cause. Temperatures dropped to near freezing in specific locations. Faint murmurs were recorded, sometimes clear enough to seem like human speech, sometimes only a language long forgotten. A note from the lead investigator summed up the chilling conclusion. The silent museum is not merely haunted. It is sentient. It remembers. It watches. And it responds. Our instruments capture only a fraction of its presence. Some part of it exists outside our comprehension. By dawn, the team departed, leaving the museum once more empty, silent in the daylight. Its outward serenity. Reports of past employees echoed through time. Night guards recalled whispers, chills, and objects moving without explanation. Curators left quietly, citing exhaustion, anxiety, and a feeling of being followed. Visitors continued to experience inexplicable sensations, from sudden shivers to visions out of the corner of their eyes. Even the city seemed to sense the museum's presence. Locals avoided it at night. Some claimed to hear faint whispers on the wind near its doors. Children, most sensitive to the unnatural, refused to enter alone. Yet the museum persisted, a repository of both history and something darker. Its exhibitions remained pristine, its halls polished, its reputation of calm carefully maintained for the outside world. The truth, however, was far more unsettling. A security camera installed near the East Wing captured an image one night that would unsettle the staff for months. The footage showed the Nameless Statue, head slightly turned, as always, but behind it, a shadowed figure appeared to linger, tall and indistinct, watching the empty corridor. The next morning, the monitors displayed nothing unusual. The statue had returned to its original posture. Staff reviewed the tapes repeatedly, but the shadow never appeared on any other camera. No explanation could be offered. It was a final reminder. The museum itself determined what could be seen, when, and by whom. A lone visitor, arriving during daylight hours, ventured into the East Wing. She paused before the statue, drawn inexplicably. For a brief moment, she felt an intense weight, like the building was pressing down, studying her. A faint whisper echoed in her ears, saying only, "Leave or stay forever." Shaken, she stepped back and left. Behind her, the statue's head tilted almost imperceptibly, as though acknowledging her presence. Later, staff found her abandoned notebook on a bench. Pages contained hurried sketches of shapes and symbols she claimed appeared in the shadows, forms that seemed impossible. Yet she drew them meticulously, as though compelled. The museum closed for the night. Its polished floors reflected nothing but darkness, chandeliers casting fractured shadows that stretched into hallways like fingers. The wind rattled the doors outside, a soft accompaniment to the building's internal hum. The nameless statue watched the empty hall, silent and eternal. The east wing remained cold, the air heavy with the weight of centuries. Somewhere in the corridors, a whisper lingered, faint but unmistakable, a warning and an invitation at once. We are always here. We remember. We wait. And outside, the city slept, unaware of the forces contained within the museum's walls. The silent museum endured, a repository of beauty, history, and a curse that no one could name. Yet in that silence, a question remained, one that no visitor could answer, and one that would haunt every soul who dared to enter. How long would it wait before claiming the next witness?